Welcome to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robby Soave. Well, President Trump distanced himself somewhat from efforts by certain Republicans, including in Florida, to downplay the effectiveness of vaccines. Here he was responding to a question about whether there should be vax mandates for school children.
Can I ask you another Florida question? The vaccine mandates that were rolled back for school children, what do you think about that?
Well, I think we have to be very careful. Look, you have some vaccines that are so amazing. The polio vaccine, I happen to think, is amazing. A lot of people think that COVID is amazing. You know, there are many people that believe strongly in that. But you have some vaccines that are so incredible. And I think you have to be very careful when you say that some people don't have to be vaccinated. It's a very tough position. So I'd give you an answer. I'll give you a feeling. But just initially, I heard about it yesterday, and it's a tough stance. Look, you have vaccines that work. They just pure and simple work. They're not controversial at all. And I think those vaccines should be used. Otherwise, some people are going to catch it, and they endanger other people. And when you don't have controversy at all, I think people should take it. Okay.
Meanwhile, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told Fox News that he is doing everything he can to correct the previous administration's approach to public health. Let's watch.
We literally we're the worst team in the league. I've been brought in as the new manager, and my job is to shake up the organization, to fire the people who are responsible for masking our children with no science, for social distancing orders with no science.
So those are the areas where I do agree with RFK Jr. very strongly, that we want accountability for made-up social distance guidelines that Fauci admits were something he just came up with, that there was no evidence that improved some kind of outcomes, masking guidance that shifted dramatically over the course of the pandemic from no need to do it to wear any kind of mask to it's not really doing any good unless you're wearing the highest quality mask. And all of that incoherence. I also appreciate Trump. He still wants credit for Operation Warp Speed being a good thing, and so he doesn't. And he doesn't believe that the vaccines are bad. He believes that they're good, and he also doesn't believe you should be required to take them. He consistently said that of the COVID vaccine. Of the other vaccines, he points out that we don't want to make people do things, but you can't even. This is something libertarians argue about all the time. You can construct an argument for why, in the case of in a school, if you're going to enroll in that school and the school says you have to do it, okay, that's maybe an abridgment on our liberties we come to accept. But I broadly agree with what Trump's saying there.
Yeah, I think it's fine. And RFK, during his very contentious hearing last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point, the news moves so fast these days. I know, same.
Or who you are.
One of the Republican senators thought they kind of tripped him up because he said that Trump deserved a Nobel Peace Prize for Operation Warp Speed, but then also talked about potential dangers of the COVID vaccine. And I don't think those two things are necessarily in conflict, because the COVID vaccine was helpful for people of a certain age demographic, age cohort, people with certain comorbidities, but also could have proven harmful in young people, particularly young males who developed myocarditis. So those two things are not mutually exclusive to me. I am very curious to see what happens with the Florida case. I could sort of be swayed in either direction. I understand why we have decided to mandate certain vaccines like measles, mumps, and rubella in schools, but Florida sort of is the main laboratory for democracy in our country right now, and they're willing to try out things that otherwise seem crazy. And so I think we will quickly find out if, yes, most parents are still going to get the vaccines, they still trust them, or everybody opts out and all the children get sick and die. I mean, it sucks to gamble with life that way, but
but generally I don't want to tell families what they're supposed to do, even if they're going to make decisions for them and for their children that I think are irresponsible or whatever. It's just not my business. It's not generally something I'm going to intervene in or want the state to intervene in. Now, of course, the role of the state is to prevent, in some level, third-party harms, and so that's the argument you make here. But of course, that was the argument, and that is I think a valid argument. Well, you can still argue about whether you want to do it for disease. There is a public health prevention of disease spreading role for the government, unless you're like a complete anarchist and don't think the government should exist at all, which no disrespect for those people whatsoever. Maybe some of them are watching.
Some disrespect from me.
Some disrespect from you. Yeah, we got to have a government do some things. We argue over what those things should be. This is one of them. But the difference between, because this is how the COVID vaccine was sold too, as a public health measure. You don't just get it for you. In fact, the argument for requiring it was that we need to make you get it to keep other people safe. And then later it turned out actually the primary beneficiary of the COVID vaccine is you if you're in a
And so you should be able to
group.
make your own personal risk assessment.
So when they make a public health argument
yes.
and then it ends up being wrong, that makes me more suspicious of their other public health-based arguments.
Yes, I completely agree. And also looking at public schools versus private schools, there are a lot of private schools that don't have to and choose not to abide by state vaccination requirements. And yet we don't have a story every other day about children dropping dead in a private school. And so that suggests to me that probably 95 to 99% of parents are going to get those really core vaccines that prevent major childhood illnesses, and maybe they're going to sidestep some of the other ones like the Hep B or the COVID-19, even without the mandates, and everyone's going to be fine.
Right. And RFK Jr. keeps being described as anti-vax, and he certainly said things about vaccines that I disagree with or I think are incorrect. But he had, when there was that measles death in, Texas, he wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal saying you should get the measles vaccine, and he has vaccinated his children. So it's just, you're anti-vax, you have to, endorse every single argument that every in favor of requiring this person has made in order to be counted as pro-vaccine or not anti-vaccine. Doesn't seem correct to me.
No.
But I'm glad that, to see what Trump said.
Well, and none of the people who talk about that mention, I bring everything back to immigration, but I think this is a valid point, which is that there were obviously a lot of people who came across the border under Joe Biden, and certainly some during the first Trump admin as well, who did not have health screenings, right? Like a huge swath of those people didn't have these childhood vaccines, and there were some disease outbreaks, particularly in HHS facilities with unaccompanied minors among the migrant population, and there was not like some huge outcry of like, oh, we're letting in all these unvaccinated people. So it just seems a little one-sided to me.
Well, and what I didn't like about they used, pandemic authority. There was title something or other
Title
to say
12,
that
I believe.
we're trying to not have COVID. People bring COVID into the country. And I'm like, okay, well, it's a little late for that.
Well, and at
because COVID is rampaging throughout the country. It's not being brought in here by immigrants.
And at the same time that they were actually using other federal workers outside of DHS, like Department of Ag workers, to send down to the border during the huge surge. In 2021, 2022, and they required those people to have COVID vaccines to go work at the border, but all the people they were processing didn't have to get a COVID vaccine to come in. It's just, none of it makes any sense.
That's very silly. That's very wear your mask to the dinner table and
and then take it off
when you're there kind of logic. All right, we'll have more free media right after this.